And the other really interesting thing, just before we stop, was to do with the bus bomb as well. There's only one bus diverted that day. Again, none of the CCTV cameras are working on the bus, but there's some very weird pictures afterwards. I mean, there's people standing up on top of the bus who are clearly not in any way injured, and yet the roof of the bus has come off. Now that, to me, is consistent with some kind of controlled explosion. And strangely enough, that day we have a van photographed next to the bus, don't we? I can't remember what's the name of the company again?
The Kingstar van, yeah.
The Kingstar van, yeah. Kingstar specialise in interesting controlled demolitions. Now, again, if you're following normal counter-terrorist practice, the closer you are to a scene of any terrorism, the more you are a prime suspect. That's how the police treat you. They don't treat you as a victim to start with. They treat you as a terrorist until they can rule you out of their inquiries. Now, so in normal circumstances, the driver of that van should have been arrested. They should have gone down the director of the company and interviewed them, and should have, and therefore, and either ruled them in or out of their inquiries.
And I love the way there are two old ladies in the back of the upper deck talking about their injuries, that their teeth are damaged, okay?
Yeah.
And they're in shock, they're in trauma. And they find it very assuring to be able to get together and talk and get over their trauma. But hell, the point is, that's where Hasib Hussein was supposed to have been sitting and blasted himself into eternity. And then there's another lady, a girl, a couple, a few seats in front of Tanya and her boyfriend, a few seats in front, and she gets gets pushed forward, and she doesn't go unconscious or anything, and I think her shoes are blown off or something. Nobody was holding their ears from the pressure. Their ears were bleeding, which is what would have happened if there'd been major pressure. All those people standing up, looking fairly nonchalant.
Just wondering what's gone on. Why is the roof of the bus suddenly come off? Kind of thing? Not there's been an explosion, which you would hear and would react in a different way.
Looking like they're lighting up a cigarette or something. Looking remarkably casual. We don't see any dead bodies around there. I found altogether about 2 or 3 dead bodies from examination of all the photographs of that bus that morning. Okay, that was the original estimate that morning on the news, 2 or 3 bodies dead. Okay, and also to point out the bus driver, the Greek bus driver, he disappeared pretty smartly from the scene. And when he was in Greece, he told his uncle about it, and his uncle reported 2 or 3 dead on the bus.
Right, and how many are they claiming dead on the bus?
Well, later, in the day or so after, it went up to 13.
Right,
a final total of 13.
So they're just kind of inventing dead people. And again, everybody finds that fanciful. We know from the Operation Northwich documents, don't we, released in the 60s, that they plan to do something very similar in the States, in which they would fake. They actually even have mock funerals for fake victims.
I suspect that those are real people who really died, though possibly not. Might have been the Piccadilly line. The point is that all 4 blast sites, the bodies all went to the same mortuary. There were 4 piles, basically. So, you know, you can't quite. It's a bit tricky to establish exactly who was. Probability is important here, and it's mathematically quite impossible that Peter Power's terror drill exercise could be accidental. I think it's very shocking the way the British police have not called him in for questioning. I mean, his totally synchronised terror drill exercise, which he kept quiet about for 3 years. He wouldn't say who he was doing it with. It was the same 3 tube stations, and a week after the event, it's on Canada television, and he talks about within 5 minutes that they went from theatre rehearsal to went live, and so it's synchronised within minutes, and it's the same 3 stations. And Peter Power is, as you know, is the maestro of British terror drills.
But again, the funniest thing about that bus we've got to remember as well at this point is the fact that when it's photographed on the side is an advert for a film called The Descent, and the press quote is outright terror, bold and brilliant, which again people are not quite sure whether that's the people carrying it out just saying, look, we can get away with this, outright terror, bold and brilliant. But the weirdest thing to me is the serial number of the bus, not the registration number, but the serial number of the bus. The middle 3 digits are 775, which is the date of the attack. One bus
that's pretty good.
Rerouted that day is the date of the attack in the middle.
But why do people not want to think about July 7th? That's what baffles me so much. And it's the continual being drenched with fear images and fear stories, and worse, hate and fear of the enemy, continually given this, so that people like you and me, who are actually not accepting the official demonised enemy image, are themselves liable to be on the receiving end of getting demonised.
Absolutely, and you've only got to look, I think it's Goebbels' statement about controlling Nazi Germany, isn't it? About how he says, you know, you start threatening people, you start making them scared, and then anybody who stands up to you is immediately a traitor, and you can marginalise them. These people are following the Nazi handbook in terms of discrediting dissenters and so on, and obviously keeping people in fear keeps them in lower vibration. Fear leads to hatred, leads to anger, unclear thinking. And you find that the modus operandi seems to be to carry out a massive terrorist attack like 9/11 or 7/7, and in the confusion afterwards caused by people being in lower vibration, in fear, means that they can then push through all these measures like the Patriot Act or terrorism acts, because people aren't thinking clearly enough at the time to be able to resist them.
Totally, yeah.
To me, actually, this is a time for rejoicing, basically, because it is so easy to expose 9/11, it's so easy to expose 7/7, that we are in a far better position to bring these nasty people to justice than we've ever been before. And anybody who's truly spiritual should see that as an enormous opportunity to stop white phosphorus being dropped on innocent kids, to stop the depleted uranium, and to just stop war in general on the planet. It's now up to us, and the people who want to take responsibility, I'm saying get on with it, basically. Don't listen to the naysayers and the munchkins.